Hello there, people of the internet. This is an interesting conundrum that I've come across a couple of times in the comment section down below. And I figured it warranted making a video of it simply because there's some clarification that needs to be done with this particular topic. So this is completely not true what I am about to say. This is what I'm saying as a metaphor to help with representation purposes so people can understand it. Let's say that we have a 1 in 7 twist barrel for your AR and a 1 in 9 twist barrel for your AR. The 1 in 7 is better for heavy bullet stabilization and the 1 in 9 twist is better for lighter bullet stabilization, right? But then let's say there's the 1 in 8 twist, which stabilizes like a good vast majority of most of the projectile weights that you're going to come across. Certain things that maybe a 1 in 9 or a 1 in 7 wouldn't be able to stabilize. That being said, most people are just going to shoot 55 and 62 grain bullets and they'll all stabilize that. So a lot of this argument doesn't really matter. This is more or less for people who are hand loaders or who are specifically invested in how ballistics work. But if we have, say, that 1 in 8 twist to stabilize like the mid-range projectiles, and we have, this is not true what I'm about to say, but we have, say, with that 1 in 8 twist, it stabilizes anywhere from 40 to 70 grain projectiles. It'll stabilize more than that, but just bear with me here. It stabilizes between 40 and 70 grain projectiles. That means that 55 grain bullets are right smack in the middle of that particular spectrum of bullet weights, correct? So people's mindset is that since that projectile is right balanced in the middle, in between completely unstabilized and completely overstabilized, that right there must be the most accurate load because it's balanced right in the middle. But that's not quite how accuracy works whenever it comes to how a firearm works. Like, for example, let's go ahead and look at, say, a 1 in 12 twist from a M16, right? M16, they got the full-length 20-inch barrels and whatnot. But let's say there's that 1 in 12 twist. The 1 in 12 twist stabilizes a 55 grain projectile, but it barely stabilizes it. Now, with that barely stabilization, whenever it smacks into a target, it's really good at tumbling and whatnot, and it does a bunch of damage onto its target. But that's a topic for another time. I got the hiccups, guys. I'm sorry about that. It's just one of the things that pops up whenever I talk a bunch. But that 55 grain bullet barely stabilizes in that 1 in 12 twist barrel, and as a result, that 55 grain bullet is extremely accurate in that 1 in 12 twist barrel because it stabilizes, but just barely. It is right on the edge of not properly stabilizing in that barrel, and we know that because a 62 grain bullet, which is very minutely heavier than a 55 grain bullet, that one does not stabilize in a 1 in 12 twist barrel. So the 55 grain bullet is right there on the edge. And what that equates to is we have the minimum amount of spin for that bullet as it travels out of the barrel, and that more or less equates to that less spin throwing off the bullet. If the bullet has any sort of like deformations or any sort of just the most minute of discrepancies going on with the projectile itself, like say you would normally find in an abundance of green tip rounds, then that bullet, as it spins much faster, like say out of a 1 in 7 twist barrel, that increased spinning would increase the effect that you would get from the deficiencies of that projectile or the deformities of that projectile. So if we had a 55 grain bullet that was, let's say the copper jacket was just like 1/1000th of an inch thicker on one side than the other, right? Which is a very common thing that you see in like cheapo ball surplus 5.56 55 grain bullets, right? They're not really made to be match grade ammunition. But from a 1 in 12 twist, that bullet spins a lot less than it would from a 1 in 7 twist. That rapid spinning of that bullet with that deformation would cause a significant increase in group size as that bullet heads downrange. And that's one of the reasons why with a 1 in 7 twist barrel, you normally see guns that are around 3 MOA accuracy, because most people shoot 55 and 62 grain bullets through it, which are like, they're not barely stabilized the way that you would want to achieve real accuracy with a firearm. They're basically in that mid-range of stabilization, and I mean 3 to 5 MOA with your rifle is going to be fine. But if you take that same 55 grain bullet and throw it in a 1 in 12, you're going to see a tremendous increase in accuracy just because that bullet is spinning a lot less. Not only that, but as that bullet spins less, you get certain, how do I explain this in really layman's terms? The force of the bullet spinning also affects the direction that a bullet is going to go. At most distances that most of us shoot at, that's really not going to be all that much of a problem. But if you have a bullet that's spinning, say, right hand or left hand turn, or clockwise or counterclockwise, or however it is that you want to say it, and you shoot out to a particularly long distance, as that bullet turns, it's going to drift in one direction or the other, and you gotta account for that. But we're talking like shooting really long distances here if we're going to be doing that. More or less, the deformities of the projectile are what really throw it off at distances that are relatively close, like say out to 300 yards or so. And each individual bullet is going to have ever so slight of a deficiency, unless we're talking about like high-end match-grade bullets. Got a really big hiccup there. Ooh, I taste my lunch off of that one. But most of us are not using really high-end match-grade bullets that are made to like exact spec every single time. Most of us are just going to be rocking, like I said, the cheapo surplus 55 and 62 grain bullets, and that's one of the reasons why we get such a big spread. If we were to, say, use a 1 in 10 twist, like my Ruger Mini 14 here, this right here is a 1983 production, I believe. Either 1982 or 1983, and it's got a 1 in 10 twist barrel inside of it. And as a result, it does stabilize both 55 and 62 grain projectiles, but barely. And as a result of that, it is quite accurate with both of those. I know a lot of people complain about accuracy problems with those, but I think that popped up as they changed twist rates later on in the production. I think they changed up twist rates in 1988, if memory serves me correctly. I'll have to do more research on that particular one. But the point is, these bullets are barely stabilized, and they're barely stabilized so you get the best accuracy possible out at long range. You don't get the effects that you get from a high RPM bullet moving one direction or another at fairly long distances. You don't get nearly as much of the effect as you would normally get from deformities in the bullet, simply because the bullet isn't spinning as much. Not only that, but like I said earlier in the video, once your bullet smacks onto that target, if it is barely stabilized, it's basically going to tumble upon impact, and that's one of the reasons why 55 grain bullets from a 1 in 12 twist long barrel like what I got right here are so like abhorrently devastating, because they're barely stabilized, and once they smack into basically anything, they tumble and they break apart and they frag and they dump all their energy onto whatever target it is that you're shooting at, and they're really, really effective. I've shot many things with my 1 in 12 and 1 in 10 twist. But yeah, if you're rocking, like, say, a 1 in 9 twist barrel, the 1 in 9 twist will stabilize 77 grain bullets. I don't know why people say that it won't. They probably just look at some chart online, but they've never actually taken that rifle out to shoot it, because I know I have this 1 in 9 twist Delton DTI-15 that I have shot a tremendous amount of VMAX 77 grain bullets through, and it stabilizes those just fine. I've shot things out to 400 yards with that. Like, that's my Coyote gun. I shoot out into a field and take those little running bastards out. But the 77 grain bullet will stabilize in that 1 in 9 twist rate, and it barely stabilizes it. And I get really, really good accuracy from that 1 in 7 twist with that 77 grain projectile. Now, if you throw that same 77 grain projectile into like a 1 in 7 twist, which is by far what most people have just because that's the military standard, they're going to notice an increasing accuracy as well. I'm sure a lot of people in my comments section are going to tell me that they run 77 grain bullets and they get like sub MOA accuracy or something like that. I'm not sure what level of accuracy you'd get with a 1 in 7 twist with 77. So as a matter of fact, I should test that. I got my Radical AR here. It's probably about 4 MOA with the 55 and 62 grain bullets. 1 in 7 twist. Let's go ahead and take it out with some heavier stuff and see how well it works. But those heavier bullets, they don't necessarily stabilize better, they just do better with that particular twist rate. And that 77 grain, although the 1 in 7 can stabilize heavier, like I've ran up to 85 grain bullets out of a 1 in 7 twist, but they stabilize a lot less than, say, a 55 grain bullet, which is entering the point of overstabilization. And that just kind of equates to less accuracy, and it gets to the point to where as a bullet it becomes more and more overstabilized, that accuracy will decrease to the point of bullet tumbling, and that's a whole topic, like I said, for another video. As a matter of fact, I have to start writing these down because that's a good one. Like, people ask, how can you overstabilize a bullet? Well, there's some science and ballistic coefficients. There's some ballistic data that goes into why a bullet does what it does at specific RPMs and specific twist rates, specific speeds, specific lengths of bullet. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll make a video talking about how a 1 in 10 twist stabilizes really lightweight bullets for the AR and like won't stabilize a 70 grain bullet or beyond 70 grain. However, a 1 in 10 twist in a 30 caliber barrel like a 30-06 can stabilize all the way up to a 220 grain bullet. Ever think about that? That's a cool video. That's a cool topic right there. There's some interesting stuff that goes into those sort of ballistics. But that's for down the road. That's a topic for another video. My point is, if you want really good accuracy with your bullets, figure out what your twist rate is and what it stabilizes barely. Like 55 grain from a 1 in 12, really, really good, really accurate, but it barely stabilizes. I can't run 62 grain. I can run both those in my Ruger Mini 14. 62 grain lead core, not the green tip stuff, but lead core is exceptionally accurate from a 1 in 10 twist. The 1 in 9 twist, I basically just kind of run whatever it is that I have through that thing. I will run the 77 grains like I said, but basically just whatever I have. I've got, I don't know how many thousands of rounds of just like bull 55 and 62 grain bullets through this particular rifle. And the Radical with the 1 in 7 twist, I haven't really shot that one all that much. So anyway, I think I've made my point here. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.